You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a more modern approach to selling, the application of virtual and hybrid selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Jon Selig. Jon is half sales guy, half stand-up comic, and parental disappointment, he says. So, Jon, first up, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You better just explain that before we go on. First the half and half, but obviously the parental disappointment bit. We don't want to start off on a downer.
Well, so just to kind of kick things off, I spent 12 years in tech sales, mainly in the Oracle world. And, you know, my little go-to phrase is my 12 years in sales was a well-paid internship for my career in mainly unpaid stand-up comedy. And, you know, I started stand-up I was a little bit disenfranchised in my sales career. And from the get-go, I noticed all these parallels between sales and stand-up and how you really need to know your audience and understand what they care about, understand what affects their emotions. And so I created comedy writing for revenue teams to show how the skills and processes that stand-up comedians use to connect with their audiences can be adopted by sellers to better connect with theirs. And as far as the all parental disappointment, you know, I took a bit of a break from my tech sales career, and I was on stage 3 to 5 times a week. And my parents were like, "What is he doing with his life?" Like, we thought he was really well established in his career and super thrilled with it. But the truth was I wasn't, and I needed to sort of just discover some new things to take my career in different directions. So for a while, they were like, "Oh my God, he's not a doctor. He's not an accountant. He's not a lawyer. He's not even in that sales career that we had accepted." But they're okay with everything now. So, and as well they should be, because they don't have a choice in the matter.
No, they don't. But it's a tough gig though, isn't it, being a stand-up?
No, it's simple. Everyone can do it. No, it's actually, it's incredibly difficult. Some people are a little bit, some people can sort of handle it and are built for it. Other people, you know, couldn't even fathom it. It does entail a lot of failure and rejection, kind of like sales. You have to develop that thick skin. You have to be prepared to iterate everything you're doing, and edit and practice, and just better understand audiences to connect with them. But it's definitely a tough gig. There's absolutely no money in the whole thing. You know, unless you just you're prepared to starve for about 15 years while you work on your craft and have undeniable work ethic, talent, and ability to market yourself and make great connections within the industry.
Then you're on your stadium tours, which is the stuff that we see, and okay, that's like not even 1%, isn't it?
And ironically, those are the worst gigs for comedians. Like, to perform to an audience of 50,000 people just looks like a nightmare, because 99.99999% of your training to be a stand-up is to perform for audiences much smaller. But I digress. But yes, there was a good payday in there.
Well, I digress. But I mean, this is what we want to talk about, isn't it? Because, you know, what you're saying is you don't just rock up and be funny, same as you don't just rock up and sell stuff, do you? It's like it's process, and you're saying actually there's so much similarity in this. This is the stuff that you're, you know, using as a vehicle to help people think about how to sell better.
Yeah, like I said, comedians deploy all these skills and processes, depending on how you pronounce it, to figure out, how can I flick on emotional switches with my audience? How can I elicit this reaction from them? Humor or comedy is rooted in truth and painful, relatable, relevant circumstances. And, you know, as sellers, our prospects are dealing with certain painful, you know, less personal, but painful nonetheless, aspects of their job. And we as vendors have solutions or remedies to those pains. And our job, especially in the world of sales development, where we're prospecting and trying to grab attention, is to literally to present a message that flicks on an emotional switch within 5 to 10 seconds. And humor, short form jokes, think about like old school 140 character Twitter. It's jokes that are 1 or 2 sentences long that take really not much time to deliver verbally or to be read in an email. And the craft of writing this kind of messaging can help sellers better stand out from the noise, and it can really highlight either a challenge that we solve for our buyers or an outcome associated with not solving the challenge for our buyers. We're telling mini stories about what sucks about the problems that we can eliminate for them. And between the message itself and the journey of assembling the message and understanding everything that'll go into a good short form joke is really enablement. And it forces reps to really understand various specifics about the problems they solve, like I said, and how they affect the buyer and their stakeholders and everyone's emotions.
And for me, I mean, this is a sales trainer coming out of me. It's that journey piece. I mean, yeah, we can get to the message, we can get to the joke bit, and that's cool. But it's this journey where you're helping people think, and it probably should be how they're thinking anyway. But you're giving a slightly different perspective to get the right things thought about. Yeah. So, what does that look like?
Well, so you're hitting the nail on the head, like, and I mentioned it, but let's unpack it a little bit further. So some of my favorite jokes that comedians tell end up with some sort of specific at the very end of the joke, a brand name being mentioned. Like someone says, "Oh, so at the end of the night, I got into an Uber," or when we ended up at an Arby's, and just the fact that they're mentioning this brand name, the brand name represents something, it tells a story. And those kind of specifics are what make jokes quite funny. And when you're able to paint a picture about a particular circumstance associated with not solving a problem, an outcome that's really specific and really granular and goes beyond just you're going to save time and money, but explains what they're going to have to deal with if they don't solve a problem, even if it's not hilarious, it's impactful. So, when I work with younger teams and I say, what happens if they don't solve this problem? First of all, a lot of younger sales teams don't even know how to explain what problem they solve. They're still hung up on the pitch. We're an AI-driven engagement platform, the 10x is scalability. And I say to them, well, you didn't answer my question, which was, what problem do you solve? And they'll kind of muddle around. We help sales teams 10x scalability with our AI-driven engagement platform. And I'm like, you're just spewing words at me, which isn't new. Like this is, I'm revisiting Silicon Valley, and it's been going on the HBO show Silicon Valley. This has been going on forever, but it persists. And reps are so focused on pitches and features, functions that they forget, like, what problem do we solve for who? And then the next challenge from there is, even if they do learn to understand how to articulate the problem, very often they can't really speak the prospect's language very well. So I have this expression: most sales pros sell stuff they've never used to people whose jobs they've never had in industries they've never worked.
Yeah.
We agree on that?
Yeah.
And it makes it hard for them to relate. So even, look, I started cold calling for Oracle a lifetime ago, it seems. And I was selling ERP. So you're calling up every functional business, every functional leader within the organization, finance, supply chain, human resources, all of them. And so I remember one of my first campaigns that I was running for one of my field sales managers. They wanted me to call on global consolidation, call CFOs, talk to them about how they're handling global consolidation. And I had 2 business degrees at the time. I had even studied finance, but I barely understood what a CFO really did on a day-to-day basis. And I had no clue what consolidation meant, other than it consolidates.
Yeah, you can't define with the same word, can you?
Right. And when I was more terrified. I wasn't that scared of getting hung up on when I was cold calling. I was more scared of them going, yeah, we're having challenges with global consolidation. What do you have? Or because then you need to lead that discussion and run that quick discovery. At least we did back then. I think things have changed where it's like, just get the meeting booked. But I had to run some discovery, and I didn't really know how to go too deep with them. All I was trying to uncover was, is there a pain? Are they looking at fixing this? Who else are they looking at? Is there a timeline? Is there budget? Like, that was kind of what I was trying to do, but I was still scared to get into the nuts and bolts of global consolidation. So the journey of writing humor for our prospects will help us really uncover what are the impact, what problem do we solve for who? And what are the specific outcomes? Again, forgive me for repeating myself. What are the specific outcomes associated with not solving a problem in a very specific way that goes beyond, well, they're going to waste time and money, which is the most common answer that a younger seller will give me around what happens if they don't solve the problem. They're going to waste time and money. And I'm like, yes, fully aware. Every business challenge or pain on the planet costs a vendor time and money or prevents them from making more revenue. Mm-hmm. But can you get into the nitty gritty? What are the root causes of those wastages of time and money? Like paint me a picture of what's actually wasting them time and money.
So again, I'm trying to picture you in training workshop. That's what you're getting them to do. Get them to just even start to recognize that. That's a massive step forward. That almost sounds like a bloody good job done. You don't need the joke stuff anymore. It's like, yes, you have done a huge service there. But you're saying, no, this is just the first step in the journey. We're going to take it on and make it even better. Now we've got that, we can properly use it.
Right, because good humor is rooted, like I said earlier, in the truth. And we can't write good jokes that are truthful unless we have consensus on what the truth is. Reps do this in breakout groups in my workshops. So they have to collaborate, they have to argue, they have to debate, and they have to come to consensus on what is the truth. And some people are quiet and shy. Why? Because they don't really have the answers, but they're learning from their peers in the process. So as long as everyone could get on the same page about what problems do we solve and why does it matter and for who, that's a win right there. But then this journey of writing the jokes not only forces us to master the subject matter, but it encourages them to say things in much simpler language, to break away from buzzwords, because you can't write jokes about really rigid wording, like, cloud-based infrastructure technology. I'm buzzword souping it. But if you can say things in simpler language, paraphrase and find synonyms and just easier ways to say things, that more flexible language can lead to good jokes.
Cool. So, yeah, so I was just thinking as a trainer, I got slightly distracted because I thought you'll experience this. When people say, what do you like about the training course? I love the breakout rooms. Really? Oh, yeah. So not the bits we were doing then. But of course, no. It's setting that up to have the good solid discussion in there, isn't it? Yeah. So they're really understanding what they should be talking to people about. They're simplifying the language. This is what comedians are doing to try to make sense of what they're going to stand up and say in front of a bunch of people to try and get them to laugh. Then, is there a formula to writing a joke? Is there a structure? Is there a way in which you start to have to put it together so it works time and time and time again?
So that's an awesome question. At the end of the day, most jokes that you hear in stand-up that don't involve body language or a wild story rely on formulas. Joke writing is pretty prescriptive. There's, comparison jokes, there's analogy jokes, and, there's something called the rule of three, for example. Really what I'm helping them do is kind of understand how these jokes work, how to sort of populate the various components of these jokes using their knowledge, their insight, and then their creativity. So the answer is yes. I teach about 4 joke formulas.
How many are there altogether? I mean, it's probably Helen's piece of string, but
according to in-depth internet research, there are about 10.
Okay.
But, I can't teach everything, and I teach the simplest ones that people can grasp.
So 4 of those. So using the knowledge, creativity is massive, isn't it? So it should be massive in sales, just all the way through the process.
You know what? It shouldn't need to be, but in 2022, it has to be. Because online selling, virtual selling is, let's look at the history of sales. It used to be you knocked on doors. Before there was even phones, people knocked on doors, and someone would answer because they weren't terrified of opening the door to a stranger back in 1910. And they would talk to them really quickly. If the person had something of value, and there was a good pitch up front, they would talk. It didn't need to be super creative. It needed probably to have some charm behind it. But as we evolved into cold calling, cold calling, I think I don't know when it was really adopted in mass quantities by large companies, but there was a point where it became easier to get people's information, and more executives were receiving more calls. So you had to figure out how to stand out. But since we've gone to cold email, since everyone's cell phone number is available online through a tool, and a gazillion companies getting seed and Series A, B, C, so on and so forth, funding, all with the need to scale on a certain timeline, sales has exploded, right? The need to prospect and the need to get prospects' attention. So yes, today more than ever, sellers, whether you're a full cycle sales rep or a sales development person, or even an AE who's running, just the demo and the discovery, need to be creative. They need to stand out. They need to be memorable. They need to, inject some personality and some levity into the process to make prospects feel like they're more than just a call stat or a deal within the pipeline, so to speak. Like they're more than a metric.
Yeah. Cool. So can we have insight into one of these structures, one of these joke structures that you so-called comedians use? Right. Sorry. Let me just explain. I had to say that to you, as I was saying to you before when we were chatting. My wife doesn't like comedians. She just doesn't find them funny. And so whenever they're on take, another of those so-called comedians.
I don't really, none of this bothers me. It's totally fine. Like the fact that I live in a comedy club from the 1980s, it's debatable how funny I am or not. You do too, apparently. You also have an addiction to brick walls, I see. So cool.
I'm there. It's great. Way forward. Sorry, so I couldn't resist it. I was going to say to you before, and then you said, "Oh, okay, let me have a go."
It's all good. So look, like the simplest kind of joke is like a comparison joke. It's like a one-liner. Like the only thing, adjective. The only thing that is more like this is like that. So, for example, I worked with this company. I'm looking at a couple of examples. Yeah, this is okay. Hold on. I'm just looking for the right joke. Yeah, okay. So good jokes compare one thing to another. So I worked with this company called Interplay Learning, and they develop, get this, training simulators for HVAC technicians. So it's online simulated training for complex heating. What does the V stand for? Ventilation and air conditioning units. Yeah. And so they sell their stuff to large property management companies that train their people in-house. And the challenge is like these newer HVAC units, they require specialized training. And if their maintenance people aren't trained up on them, they have to outsource when there's a problem at a building. They have to call a third party who is then very expensive and unpredictable with how they say things need to get fixed. And there's a lack of trust. So they wanted to write a joke about how hard it is to scale training. Because if you have, let's say, 30 technicians, it's hard to really like get them all in the same room for a face-to-face, and even virtual training is hard. They all have different schedules, and therefore, if they're not kept up to date on things, they might not be available. They may not be in a position to fix an HVAC unit at a big building when they need them to. So the joke these guys wrote was, and again, the challenge is it's very costly to outsource this maintenance to a third-party vendor. The only thing harder to scale than one-on-one maintenance training is that mountain of bills from your third-party vendor.
Right.
So they say in humor or in comedy, it's not funny if you have to explain it, but with all the jokes that I help my clients write, you have to explain it for it to be even mildly funny, because it's not written for this audience listening to this podcast.
No, totally. But that's your process. As we said before, you've really got them to understand that audience, which they might not even been doing themselves that well before, to be able to come up with that joke. Now, that's the important bit. That's what I've really taken away from this first part of the conversation.
Correct. So if we look at this joke to answer your question, what is a simple joke formula? It's comparing one thing to something completely unexpected. Right. So the only thing harder to scale then one-on-one maintenance training is that mountain of bills from your third-party vendor. So we're using the word scale in a couple of different ways. One is like hiking. The other is like, spreading out, or I never know how to grow the training knowledge with that growing mountain of bills from your third-party vendor, which you're going to have to hike up to deal with. So that, to me, that's a perfect example of comparing two very different things.
And is it almost like the more, I think you just said, the more shocking, the more it makes you kind of stand back and go, ooh, with the comparison, almost like the more effective it'll be?
Yes, but you use the word shocking, and I need to address that. We don't ever want to say anything offensive or rude or filthy or anything like that. I mean, everything is meant to. So when you say shocking, surprising, I think
surprising. I meant,
unexpected. Like people didn't expect.
Yes.
Because when you hear it all, it makes a laugh. It generates a laugh from the target audience. Like, oh, that's funny because it's true. We spend a lot of money on third parties. It adds up. Like, and why are you bringing this up? How can I help you, Mr. or Ms. Seller?
Yeah. And so again, you're very quick to jump on me there. Don't go down the route of trying to be offensive, rude. You're not writing a LinkedIn hook to try to drag folk in and to get some kind of visceral reaction. You said you want an emotional reaction, but you're not doing it with that almost like cheap, might I say, way of working.
Well, look, humor, the best humor is clean, to be quite honest. And I'm not even like a proponent of like, I don't like to be offended. I love offensive comedy, to be quite frank, as long as it's well done, it's smart. But I don't like offensive for the sake of offensive. But when we're writing humor for sales, I mean, we have no choice. We cannot be offensive in any way. That means anything to do with gender, culture, ethnicity, religion, politics. We never want to mention politics. Just
don't even say it.
No, exactly. And we don't want to punch down on marginalized groups in society, whether it's like the physically or the economically disadvantaged. We want to keep things really within this box of making business points.
No, I like it. No, I really like the way that the process of making people think about, what are you actually here for? To help people with this stuff, and to get that message across super quick.
Can I offer another kind of like comparison joke?
Oh, yeah, about sales training.
Right. What's that? Say that one more time.
About sales training. That's something I could use next week.
Okay. Well, okay. So do you prospect?
A little bit, not much, to be fair. We get a little bit better than so. It's probably hard for me to to set you up for it.
No, but that's okay. Let's imagine you do prospect. Let's imagine you do cold outreach, whether it's over the phone, whether it's email, whether it's over LinkedIn, like you want to connect with new people, whether it's a voicemail, whether it's a video, like a vidyard bomb kind of message. What problem does Fred solve for who?
Sales directors, sales VPs, getting sales teams up to date.
Okay. What happens if sellers don't get up to date?
They'll lag behind. They won't hit the sales. Sales director doesn't hit his numbers. He gets sacked. He's got no money. He loses his house.
So those last four are all what I call fear-based. I try to exclude those from outcomes of solving a problem because they're too fear-mongery, they're too general. Our goal is to paint a clear picture about a circumstance of what could happen if your target persona, the director or VP of sales, ignores the problem which you can eliminate. So let's get specific. What's a specific associated with not solving the problem that you can eliminate?
Okay, let's go down the specific route of salespeople are going to be ineffective in what they do. They're going to chuck more effort after bad effort, which is going to make them tired and stressed. And we're still not going to be hitting target.
Okay, and if sellers are stressed and tired, I guess that's can we say it's frustrating or
frustrating? Yeah.
Angry? Okay, well here's we're doing cold outreach. We're writing a joke for cold outreach. What is another way to express, let's see if you know this or you can get this. Actually, I'll just share it just in the interest of time. If I'm angry at you, I give you a cold stare. I have a cold heart. I do things in cold blood. I give you the cold shoulder. There's all these great analogies or idioms actually that involve the word cold. So one of my little workshops is called Cold Openers. It's also coming out as a self-guided course. Shameless plug here.
That's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do. If it was out, I'd say let's put a link in the notes.
Well, we can do that too. It's not quite ready for launch, but maybe by the time this podcast is out, it will be live. In short, this call or this email or this LinkedIn connection request is colder than the shoulder your reps give you when they're insert your problem, insert the problem you solve.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
Or the scare they give you when they're left behind. I think that's how you phrased it. But we could rephrase that joke in so many ways. And if you, let's say, were to cold call someone and say, hey, John, this is Fred, and this call is colder than the stare your sales reps give you when X happens. It's going to be something that's truthful. It's going to be unexpected. This so-called pattern interrupt, which I don't love that term, but it's real. And it's just designed to highlight an uncomfortable truth. And if your prospect laughs, you're in a position to say, I'm glad you're laughing. Why do you find that funny? Oh my God, because I can relate to that. It's happening now, or it happened in my last job. At the very least, you're getting the conversation going.
Because sometimes it's going to be that kind of nervous laugh, isn't it? As in not that is rip-roaringly funny. It's yeah, you've struck a bit of a nerve there. It's that kind of nervous, how you respond in stress, yeah.
Listen, the goal is to get both. The goal is to write the joke so that it is funny, but also because you've struck a nerve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of a cold opener, you're comparing your outreach to an emotional sort of either your prospect or your one of their core stakeholders emotional reactions to a problem. Like those are the two things you're trying to compare: your outreach to a stakeholder's emotional reaction to the problem you can eliminate for them.
Got you. Yeah. Sorry, my mind has just gone to Blackadder.
America, so don't know too much about it, but I do know people love it.
Oh yeah, it's a brilliant script. But when they talk about you've got to be cunning, and he goes, "Yes, I'm going to be more cunning than a fox that's got a degree in cunningness in cunning from Oxford University or something like that." Yeah, it's like a silly
comment. Sounds like a
comparison
joke. Yes, it's a perfect comparison joke. Exactly.
Yeah. Which of course you'd laugh because it was a silly scenario, but actually I get what you're talking about. That is a very cunning thing. So, I love it. So, we're using comedy or comedy processes, joke writing, as a means of kind of just putting a different light, a different perspective on sales enablement to make people's jobs a little easier, a little more fun, I suppose. We would hope, and because it's a bit different. I mean, there's so many people doing the same stuff, and I'm talking about training now. And again, people do the same thing. When you start putting this different angle on it, it's sort of. I mean, what was your expression? It does help you start to stand out. Helps you to stand out. Helps the salesperson stand out.
Yeah, and here's an honest to goodness take. I mean, look, once you have the joke, the short 1 or 2 sentence, truth that gets this emotional reaction. Some people feel great about delivering it verbally, and some people, maybe they just want to stick to using it in email correspondence, cold email, or LinkedIn connection requests. But there is a certain fraction of reps that are like, oh man, I can do this. I can start a cold call with, hey, Fred, this is John. We've never spoken before. So this call is colder than the relationship between sales and marketing.
Yeah, that's a good
one. Not hard. It's short, it's quick, and you could even make it shorter. By getting rid of the we've never spoken before part, but some people will gravitate to that and really, want to take that on. Others are like, I can't see myself starting a cold call with that. And that's okay. The journey to writing those jokes is meant to just make them more confident, more knowledgeable, and be be less intimidated by approaching an executive from a particular line of business.
Yeah, no, funny. I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking this must be a real confidence booster, just to kind of know more about what's going on, some of the dynamics of, kind of how a lot of personal interaction works. I mean, I love all this sort of stuff anyway. So, but just knowing a bit more about it helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you are, look, I view sales reps as consultants who solve hyper niche business problems, and their job is to know everything about that problem inside and out, who is affected by the problem, so that they can figure out, is there going to be value in my outreach to this prospect? If they're not struggling with this problem, why would I call them, or why would I email them, or why would I offer them a demo? So the goal is to enable them and make them confident in their subject matter, be better versed in the subject matter expertise, so that they have that confidence that when they reach out, maybe they can craft just a straightforward message that's more like in line with who they are and their selling style, or they're using humor to do it. But either way, if the conversation gets going, they're not so intimidated to have a more peer-to-peer discussion.
Yeah. And again, another thing I've just written down here, that's super niche problem, as opposed to all things, all people. I'm just going to try and hit you with something that's so broad it doesn't make sense to anybody. Rubbish joke, if that was what it was. It's no, we're going to get it right down, focusing it in, and bang, really hit home. And that's what will get that reaction.
There's a lot of, you and I both lived in this LinkedIn sales bubble where there's an endless amount of advice that's all kind of the same, going back and forth. And, there's some cold call openers that are designed to get laughs from the person on the other end, but it doesn't highlight the relevance for your call. So even if you get them laughing, you've earned some attention, some extra time, but you're still at ground zero. Whereas, the right joke can highlight that relevance and earn that permission all in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love structures and understanding the dynamics of conversation and words and all that sort of stuff. And I could keep asking you questions about this till the cows come home. But I do have an eye on the clock. Just before I start to wrap up, is there anything that I should have asked you about the use of comedy techniques, the stuff that you do, that you just need to get off your chest? Tell us about.
I think we covered it a lot. I mean, I think the one we didn't really touch on very much, I think we did a bit, is just creativity. Especially in tech sales, I mean, there's a lingo, there's a language, it's considered safe, but it's a little nonsensical at times, right? We offer cloud virtualization technologies that scale to meet your robust. I mean, humans don't talk like this at all. And I get that every industry, I was talking with a friend last night, he's in communications at a large university. I said, you guys have your own language, and every little group has its own language. That's fine. But I think a lot of, again, younger sales professionals in particular, they don't relate to and connect with that language. It's not natural for them. So we need to sort of use the creative process to help them find new words and phrases that will give them that comfort and feel more confident. Oh, this means that in simple English. Well, I can say that. I feel good about that. So that creative process is meant to not only to help them come up with the funny part, but there's that middle piece where it's all about paraphrasing and finding good language that's a little bit more general, a little bit more vague, but can be used to highlight the same specifics that we need to.
That's an interesting one. How often do you find that people, when they're trying to discover that language or unpick it and put it into the language that you suggested there, actually go back to the way that they would speak normally? Because they've kind of put this sales hat on and go, oh, I need to say things in a certain way to sound a bit more authoritative and kind of as though I've got the credibility. And it's like, well, no, that's just it's silly. No one talks like that. Go back to how you would speak to your mate down the pub, nearly. Do you ever find that you're kind of doing that and reversing them back into their normal state?
I think that some sales reps come away from my training and they're like, I'm totally using this, and others revert back to what they do. And that's every training on the planet, right? Some take some go, I love this, that I'm working this into my sales game. Others think they're going to, and then they're caught up in, the metrics and whatever else they have to do to, hit numbers. And they revert back to the way they used to do things. And the training is washed away. If they take away one or two things from the whole thing, I'm delighted.
This is another discussion on making training stick and reinforcement and all the rest of it. But we'll probably have to look at are the comedic principles. There we go. We just told me to use normal language, and I'm now making stuff up. Comedic principles, whatever they be, Fred. Are there other things which can start to help stuff stick? Maybe that's a new episode.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do it.
We'll have a go at that. Jon, how can people get in touch with you, first up?
Yeah, website, jonselig.com. There is no H in Jon. I like to make a joke there is, but it's both silent and invisible. jonselig.com. And people can, really the best place to connect with me is LinkedIn. If people come to Jon Selig, I encourage them to subscribe to grab my content. I put out a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn and through my website. So those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
We will pop those links into the show notes. Depending when this goes out, if you let me know, and we will pop the link to that course you're talking about as well, because that sounds really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll put that in too. But no, brilliant. No, thanks for coming along and sharing some of the insights. Last question: when's your next gig? Because you are still doing stuff, correct?
No, actually, I'm on a bit of a hiatus from stand-up. I'm announcing that to the world right now.
Exclusive on the Sales Today podcast.
Absolutely, you get the scoop, Fred. I might go back to it, but this business is very time-consuming. There's a lot to do, and it's just that there is an investment, a time commitment to doing stand-up. I mean, I never pursued it professionally. I was just some people want to run half marathons or full marathons. I just wanted to figure out, how do I make people laugh? And you need to work intensively to do it. Yeah. Going up on stage once a week, I feel, is like, again, exercising once a week. You're not going to get better at it. But after doing that for 8 years and then quite a bit of virtual during the pandemic, these days, I'm just sort of focused on the business. I have to create a lot of content, so I get to flex my comedic muscles that way. I might go back to stand up at some point, but for now, there's just too much work to do, and so I'm just on a bit of a break.
Cool. Well, you will let us know, I hope, when you next do, and we can tune in, turn up, whatever it may be. So
absolutely, and I'd love to someday make it over to England, perform at Hyde Park for really the entire country. That would be great.
Make Mrs. Copestake laugh. There we go. That is your challenge. Should you be willing to? That
sounds more difficult than going to Hyde Park and making the entire city of London laugh.
There's a comparison. That's easier to do something or other than make Mrs. Copestake laugh with a comedy show. There we go.
Up for the challenge.
Excellent, mate. That's very good. Look, thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us. We'll speak again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. It's been great chatting.
Cheers.